So let us talk about the next question. And the question is, what is the purpose of flow user checkbox on the user record? And how is it different from run flows permission in a profile? So one thing I want to tell you is that flow user checkbox you might not see at your user level if your org is a new org. Okay. But if you are working on the previous previous release orgs, then you might see it. But now it doesn't come anymore with the new org. And what you see is the run flow permission in the profile level. So where do you see it? If you go to the profile in the app permissions, okay, in the app permissions, you can see run flows, and it says that in this org, run any active flow. So if I want to run any active flow, I should have this permission, run flows. In experience builder side, run any active flow that's distributed with the flow lightning component. Okay. So this is a must to have permission. If I do not have this permission, I won't be able to run the flows. So this is a must to have permission going forward. Okay. Now here, if I go, and since this particular user do not have this permission, so let me see how the behavior is. When I go to the setup and look for flows, okay, these are the flows. And when I look at these flows, I cannot check them. I cannot open any of the flow. Even I'm not able to create any flow. So one permission that I would need for flow to work on the flow is called view flows. Okay. So this permission is something which I do need at least to view the flows. Again, there are some other permissions like create or edit flows. This also you would need to create the flows. Then you have delete permission to delete the flows. Okay. So these flow level permissions we need to assign explicitly. And if you assign run flows, then in that case, you can run any active flow. So at the flow level, there are certain permissions, and you need to decide who should have these permissions or who should not have. So here you can see create or modify activation triggered flow. So unless you assign these permissions, the user won't be able to control flows. And now flows has become a major part of it, part of the development. So that is why Salesforce has decided to give these permissions as a separate. Here you can see add decision element to flow, add create element to flow. Okay. So these all are now separate permissions. Now if I look at it, it comes under flow and flow orchestration. So you can decide who should have what permission, and if you are a developer, you should have all these permissions enabled to your profile. Okay. So I have assigned all these permissions because without these permissions, I won't be able to work on the flows. Now this is a really important setting, and now nothing is controlled at the user level. So now let's try to find the answer for it. So run flows permission is a system level profile permission setting that decides whether a user can execute any active flow, including screen flow and auto launched flows. So whether you would be able to execute the flow or not, that would be decided by the run flow. So you should have run flow. If you do not have the run flow, you won't be able to execute the flow. So what is the main purpose of the flow? So that you can at least execute it. So you can say that a run flow is the minimum permission which you have to grant to your profile, so that at least the user with that profile can execute the flow. Okay. Now without this permission, the user cannot start a flow at all, even if the flow is embedded on a lightning page or button. So it turns out to be a very important permission which we have to explicitly assign. Okay. But one thing you need to notice here is that it does not give permission to edit a flow or modify data. So let me just save this. And now when I go back here and refresh, now I can see the flows. I can also create a new flow. And these are all the flows I can create: screen flow, recall triggered flow, auto launch flow. And if I want to see the existing flow, even I can see the existing one as well. So let's say any of this I can open, let's say this one. So this is the purpose of run flow. So some important point that it is a system permission under the profile. It is not a system permission. It is basically app permission under the profile or permission set. It is mandatory for a user to run any flow manually in the UI, and without it, Salesforce throw the error, you don't have permission to run this flow. and it does not bypass CRUD, FLS, or sharing rules. That will still be applicable, and it is applicable to both the screen flow and auto launch flow. Now, here, one important thing I want to tell you is that if you go to the profile, okay, and the profile overview, you would be able to see flow access as well. So where you would decide that what particular flows should be allowed for this particular profile. So it is not like for all the flows I have to decide the flow access, but if you want to access any flow directly by the URL, then you have to explicitly make it enable. Otherwise, it's fine to keep it under the available section. Okay, but the run flow permission is important. So I have very clearly mentioned it over here that there is something called flow access. Flow access control specifies flows a user is allowed to run. Okay, and here you can see that, however, adding flow here is not always required. It only matters if user is trying to access a flow using direct URL from the setup screen. If the flow is embedded in a lightning page, app button, or quick action, and the user has run flow permission, then you don't need to explicitly mention it here. Okay, so this is something which we should understand. And I already talked about flow user checkbox, which is not anymore relevant. You even won't see this checkbox in the new orgs. So what we need to understand is that the run flow permission and the other flow level permissions under the app permission for the profile, and also the flow access. And it is what all you need for a flow, nothing at the user level.